Greetings and welcome to Creative Briefing, an ad hoc show that talks about creativity in all the many shapes and sizes and forms that it comes in. I was asked this recently, who are you? Yes, I've realised I've neglected to introduce myself. I am Adam. I am the owner of Influxx Media Production. We create visual content for brands, small businesses, and agencies. And this is just an avenue for me to pass on some of the creative tips and tricks and share some skills with the world at large. As I've been saying, we're in a strange time. People finding themselves either on lockdown or working from home or in sort of compromised states of normality. So with that, trying to give everyone a sense of purpose, and we as humans we find this often through creativity. And even people who say, "Oh, I'm not creative. I can't draw." There's more to it than that. There's the creativity is within all of us. It's what defines us as humans. And obviously, at the moment, we're in troubled times in a lot of parts of the world, and creativity expresses the better part of our humanity. So I encourage everyone to look into their own creativity and find ways to express themselves. And obviously here, I'm solely so far really dealing with like digital media as far as creativity, but there are many ways, whether you are want to look into writing or stamp collecting or DIY woodworking. There's all kinds of ways for you to explore your own creativity, and if I find a clever way to do this within the confines of my small office here, maybe we'll do that in the future. But because I don't want to, creativity obviously is a vast world, and I do want to explore other facets of it outside of just the digital tools. Obviously, it makes it more convenient to work on a computer in the digital realm and share it with the world. Anyway, that being said, let's take a look at, one second, what's going on? Why do I not have? Let's take a look at today's lesson. Here's the complete version. It's just a very quick text treatment that uses a sort of grungy, glitchy technique, which is, fairly popular for a while. I think a lot of people still use it. So I think there's some value in learning some of these tools. Using some grungy textures, using like a wipe, and using some graphics overlaying the text to create like I say, a grungy, glitchy. And we're going to take a look at that real quick. So it's got a certain quality that's still pretty popular to use as like an intro or a transition. So obviously this is the finished project that I built a while ago. Let's take a look at the base from that we'll be building up from scratch almost. And I've done a lot of the prep work. A lot of it is developed in Photoshop, and you import the layered Photoshop file into After Effects. I'm not going to cover that. I have a background which is, comprised of several layers that are built up to create, a fairly organic texture with a certain color palette, and that is the base layer. It also has a vignette applied to it, so that just kind of darkens off the edges a little bit. On top of that, I have just this organic, grungy sort of texture. It's just a static JPEG that's laid over it with a color burn blending mode. Then we have these vertical bars that for now are overlaid, and these are just like a grayscale static JPEG image again. And then we have our text layers here, which we'll get to in a second. So what I want to do is overlay this, but I don't want the whole screen to be affected by this. I want to obviously create a matte where various parts of it come in and fade out at different times. So I have a matte comp that is pre-built, and I'll take a quick look at this. I mean, I'm not going to build every element on the fly. I want this to be a fairly quick little lesson, but let's reverse engineer this so we can see what we have. We just have it's just a gradient. It's just a solid image. It's created in Photoshop with a like a radial gradient that then has the mosaic filter effect applied to it, which over time animates the number of rows and columns to create like a pixelated sort of shrinking effect. Nothing too fancy there. And then on the layer above it, we have a block dissolve that is animating just a couple of the properties. Take a look at the keyframes on this. We can see it's just the transition completeness just changes 5%. It's not a lot, and then the block width and height. So you're just getting this slight change over time of the transparent areas. Now the block dissolve, obviously, it filters from like fully opaque to fully transparent with this block technique. But for creating a sort of grungy matte, it's also kind of cool to use it in that capacity. Now if we add the mosaic effect over the top of that, now with a very large, look at the block size, it's low block count makes the blocks larger. So, and again, these are animated over time to shrink slightly. So you get this sort of gritty, pixelated, choppy feeling. And because the block width, the block numbers, the block width and height, they don't tween. You're not getting a shrinking of the blocks. You're going from this many blocks to this many blocks, and it creates a very choppy feeling, which is perfect for the look we're looking for. So that's over the small blocks. Then the large blocks have the holes in it thanks to the block dissolve effect, the transition. So we have these areas within the large blocks that are revealing some smaller, higher pixelation sort of effect, if you will. So it's very gritty, very choppy, and then I've added an adjustment layer with some curves over it just to reduce the contrast. I want the matte to be revealing a little bit more without the. If you take a look at the contrast of the image, the lower areas are completely black, and I just wanted to, soften that a little bit to allow more of the effect to go through. So that's basically how the matte is built. So if we add this matte to the comp, and I'm going to turn it off, and then the vertical bars layer, I'm now going to make a luma matte, which is going to use the grayscale properties of the layer above it to reveal certain areas. And you can see over time, actually I think, yep, that needs to be Command Option F to fit that to the screen. We can turn it off now. You can see it's allowing certain parts of we've got this dark area here, and we've got this dark areas at the edge and some light areas sort of flanking the center area. Put the luma matte back on. You can see that this dark area here, the light areas flanking it, and then some dark areas in the corner, and it generally fades out towards the bottom. So we have just some subtle grunginess that changes over time. If it just cache that real quick, let that play through. You can see it's a real subtle effect, it's a real subtle look. We're not creating mad splatters everywhere. It's just a subtle changing and adding a little bit of grittiness to the... It's just a very subtle amount of texture. So I also want to add another adjustment layer, and let's make that an adjustment layer by clicking the little adjustment layer icon here, which basically turns the layer transparent, and then any effects applied to that layer apply to every layer beneath it in the stack. So it's a good way of applying one effect uniformly to a whole bunch of layers in a sort of very efficient manner. So I'm going to where's my effects? I'm looking for the mosaic again. So I'm just going to double click that to apply it. So I've got the mosaic, and let's see, you can just do 20 and 10, use sharp colors. So there's my adjustment layer applying to the entire layer beneath it. Now obviously that's too much, so what we can do is use a blending mode on the adjustment layer, and I think I'll start with overlay. So now I've applied the mosaic to every layer beneath it, and you can see it's very boxy. It's added a very nice boxy look to it. It's a bit strong still, so I'm going to hit T to reveal the opacity, and I'm just going to reduce that so that it darkens up the background a little bit, and also you can still see that up in the corners here where the vignette is, it's still boxing those up a little bit. Let's change this from overlay to, let's see what color burn looks like. That's not bad. I like that a bit more than... So I'm going to again hit T, and I'm going to reduce that. It's getting a little dark. Let's see if we still... Yeah, so again, it's still very subtle, and we've still got... You can see in the corners, maybe that's a little bit too big. Let's see. Maybe I'll make this 15 and 5. Maybe I'll make it 25 and 15. There we go. It's a little smaller. So the actual size of the squares are a little smaller. That's looking good. Let's take a quick preview of that. Okay. Still, what I'd like to do, we've got this grungy area here. I'd like to break that up a little bit more. So that breaks up quite nicely, but it's getting a little dark. So maybe soft light. Yeah, okay. I think that breaks up the organic texture picture a little more with the mosaic effect. When I reduce the opacity, it reduces the effects of that mosaic. So I want to make sure it doesn't get too dark, but balance that against the effect I'm trying to achieve. So, like I always say, it's a pushing and pulling, exploring, trying to find a balance between, you know, one effect or one process and another. So we've got our background, and it's kind of subtly textured, it's moving over time, and it's a bit choppy and grungy. Let's address the text elements now, where we're transitioning these text transitions, which is really the point of this exercise. Now, if I just... Okay, so using the block dissolve again. So let's focus on this fella right here for now. Effect, let's look in here for block. Block dissolve. So let's just bring the transition completion to about midway, 50%, so we can get an idea of what the effect is doing. Block width 1 pixel by 1 pixel, obviously that's way too small for what we want. I'm going to bring this up to quite a high number and see, and I'm also going to not use soft edges. So now we can see we've got a much bigger chunks that are going to be transitioning over time. You can, if we sort of swipe through the transition completion. So I'm going to reduce the block height a little bit because it's obviously a more wider graphic. So yes, let's reduce that a bit more and make this a little wider so it's kind of hyper landscape in its proportion as far as like the block size that we reveal. So now I'm going to set a keyframe by clicking on the stopwatch, and let's see, use the marker here at 1 second as our, and I'm going to do Option right square bracket to set both of these text layers their out point, and hit U to reveal the keyframe for the transition, and I'm going to shift drag that so it snaps to the beginning, and actually I'm going to snap it to the end because 0% transition is like the finishing point. And I'm going to bring the timeline back to the beginning and just drag that up to 100%. So now we've got this transition. Actually, I don't want those out points. I'm not sure why I did that. That's just the transition length. Oops. So just preview that first bit then. It's a bit slow. We can speed that up. Maybe do 10 frames. See how that. So I still think the blocks are a little too large. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to reduce the height again a bit more so we get these narrow, these wide but not very tall blocks. The block width seems about right. Yeah, that feels a bit better. Yeah, that feels a bit better to me. Okay, so with that done, let's take a look at the text in the top corner there. I'm going to do the same block dissolve to this. Let's bring that up to around 50 again. Let's make these larger again, turn off soft edges. But obviously the graphic is smaller, so I want the block sizes to be smaller relative to the size of the graphic. Block height 17. Still want the blocks to be proportionately quite wider than they are tall. So very, very hyper non-square. Let's see how that looks. Yeah. Maybe that could be a little bit bigger. Okay, let's go with that. I'm going to hit the keyframe stopwatch marker there, hit U to reveal the keyframe, and let's drag this to the beginning. We did about, what, 10 frames for the last one, so put the timeline marker at 10 frames. Bring bring that down to 0, hit home to go home, and then bring that up to 100, and then we've got our transition. Let's play that. Okay, that's not bad. So what I want is the page title to be coming in after this. I'm just going to drag the layer to about the 10 frame marker so that the text comes in the top left first, and then the page title comes in. It's got a decent flow about it, and again the texture in the background is offering us an extra sort of subtle texture. So coming together. Now, the one final kind of really cool glitchy bit that I want to do is, if we look at the complete version, you'll see I've got these box wipe layers. Let me preview this again. So, got this boxy sort of graphic, like it's almost like pixels or shrapnel, and the thing's sort of unexploding, and it's sort of coming together, but without using particle systems or anything too complex. This is a very, very quick and easy and efficient, not very computing intensive way of doing this. So we have these box wipes. So this box wipe is already built. You can see it's just the same layer in a sort of random manner, flickering and moving across the screen. So I'm going to build that from scratch. I'm going to create a new comp. I'm going to call it box wipe 2. Actually, never mind that. I'm just going to open up this box wipe and delete everything. I already have the comp built and named, and we've got the correct proportion, so we're just going to drag in the pixels, and it's just again, it's built in Photoshop when the comp is built, and it's just a sort of faceted. It's not very. It's an aliased box of pixels, basically. Very, very simple. Nothing fancy to it. So what I'm going to do, I have this. I have this little expression. So if I press P to reveal the position and I hold Option and click on the stopwatch, now I'm basically in expression mode, and I can type in some code to create an expression for that property, in this case position, and I'm going to paste in the expression I created earlier. So what do we have here? Let's reverse engineer this for a second. I have a variable R, which is set to a value of random between 0 and 860, and 860 is the width of this comp. So the position, or so the random value is somewhere between 0 and 860, which is somewhere between here and here. So x equals r. So the variable x now resolves to the variable r, which is the random number between 860. So y is set to the current layer's transform. So if I type in y equals and then drag the pick whip to the y position, because I'm not changing the x position, I only want to change the y position, so I can just drag the pick whip to the y property, and I can hit the semicolon. Now I have the variable y is equal to the current position of on the y-axis of this layer. And now to return the values and apply them to the property, I open up the square bracket, press X, which is the variable X, which is the random value between 0 and 860. So the X position is going to be somewhere between 0 and 860, just randomly. And what the random math function does is that every frame it will recalculate another random number between 0 and 860. So on every frame, the X position is going to be somewhere randomly between completely over here or completely over here, while the Y position remains as it was set. So X, comma, Y, close the square bracket, and hit enter, and now we can see that every frame is sort of in a very glitchy, very choppy manner. It's just randomly all the way across the screen. So very cool. So let's tackle the scale. We'll hit the layer, hit S, option on the stopwatch. Now we're in that mode, expression mode. Let's take a look at the expression. So we start this expression with a variable I, which equals index. Index is the number of the layer in the layer stack. So we've only got one right now, and so it's layer 1. Then we have excuse me, getting thirsty here. Variable XR equals a random number between 10 and 50. Then we have YR, a random number between 0 and 30. So X equals XR, which is this number here, times 2. So X now equals a random number between 20 and 100. So if you see how that works, you create a random number, then you can divide it or multiply it to create like a center point of randomness that can now go like either random here or random here, if that makes sense. By creating a random number between two values and then timesing it by 2, Y equals YR times I times the index. So layer 1 is going to be multiplied, the YR random number is going to be multiplied by 1, and then subsequent layers will be incrementally larger. So you can create this smaller graphic and with progressively larger graphics. And as you'll see in a second, combined with the X property animating, you can create a very varied array of images. So then again, open square bracket, X comma Y close bracket, that returns the value to the property. Not sure I explained that the best as it could have been, but well, hopefully seeing it in practice will allow that to be more obvious. So let's preview this real quick. Actually, there we go. So it's going from small and boxy to very, very tiny scale-wise. So the X value is randomly scaled between 20 and 100, and the Y scale is randomly scaled between 0 and 30. So it can be a maximum of 30%, a minimum of 0%. So that is how we've got this thing chattering across the screen, this solo. So with this expression, all I have to do now is just do Command D, Control D, to make a bunch of copies. And with that scale, using the index to multiply the scale, now I have you can see the X is random, so that each layer can be anywhere across the screen, but each layer is getting progressively bigger. But because it's not getting progressively bigger in a linear fashion, at least spatially across the comp, we're getting layer 1 small here, layer 2 slightly bigger here, layer 3 slightly bigger here, so on and so forth, to where we have this very random looking, very random, very choppy, very bitty, and varied in as far as like widths and heights, just by creating that one little expression or two little expressions and then duplicating that one layer several times. To have to hand animate this would be laborious, it'd be boring, it'd be tedious, and it would be obviously be time consuming. Having a little bit of expression and then just duplicate several times, you've got a great effective look technique without having to spend too much in the way of energy, and so you're really using the tools so you can focus on being creative rather than have to use your energy and click the keyframe, move it here, scale it, move that. It's the random, because we're doing something glitchy and choppy, the random function really helps us, because the random number, it doesn't smooth tween. There are ways to, get things smoother and tweener and get them to be sort of somewhat random, but in this case, just using the random function helps us get that really chattery look. All right, hope that made sense. Now what we can do is take that box wipe. I'm going to drag that over the text. I'm going to scale it down a little bit and maybe a little bit more, and bring the height down slightly disproportionately. And I'm going to set this to add, obviously. Not that it makes much difference, white on white. So let's see what we have. It runs a little long, so I'm going to bring that out to about a few frames after the block dissolve transition has occurred on the text layer. And I might even bring the text in a couple of frames so that we have the few pixels of that leading us into the transition. So by making the text transition start after the box wipe, the sort of pixels, that will smooth it out a little bit and lead us into, let's see, I think I'm going to make that Y a little taller. Yeah, I could afford to be a little taller. And maybe I'll make it a little less wide as well, and bring the position over there a little bit. Okay, so I think that's okay. I'm going to duplicate that layer, and I am going to make the scale on the second one a little smaller. Maybe I'll offset it a little bit. And scale this even smaller in this direction. And what I think I'll do, I will set a scale keyframe at the beginning and round about the middle, Option S, and go to the out point, Option S again, and I'm going to make the scale on the XY, on the Y, very small as it comes in and out. So if I turn the first layer off, what you can see is it gets small. Let's turn the text layer off as well so you can see what's going on. So it starts small and then gets bigger. Let's make that a little. How tall is that? Yeah, okay. So what it's just adding an extra bit of grittiness in the center lines. We've got this larger texture of pixels kind of fluttering in, and in the center I want to add a little bit more density. So I've scaled it down a little bit and animated it over time to sort of grow. So if I turn these layers back on, let's see what that looks like. And I think maybe I'm going to shift that over again just a little. Let's see how that's looking. Okay, that's not looking too bad. Happy with that. It's gritty and choppy, and it's the effect we're after. So we're running a little long here, and this is really, I just want to focus on a couple of techniques. I don't want to make this a complete dissertation on this this project, but I will. Let's copy and paste. I have, and let's take a quick look at what we have here. I have an optical flares on here that just sort of has some of the flickering, and it animates in brightness. Let's, is this 2 seconds? That's 2 seconds, yeah. So let's trim this comp down to size. So I have two flares, one slightly larger, one slightly brighter. Again, just to add a little bit of density, and you can see it just adds that center streak across the middle there. Then I've added a little color correction just to blue it up, reduce the contrast, and soften the overall look, and add a little glow. Make the text edges are quite sharp, and just by a very slight glow, it just kind of burns, blends, it unites the whole page so that the text feels part of it rather than an element sat on top of it. So that's basically the look. So get this to play through real quick. Oh. All right, so that's that. I hope you found something useful. I think the main thing is the using the expression to create something random, which helps make things choppy and glitchy. Using the block dissolve helps, and with the mosaic to create the background, the block dissolve and the mosaic, so you can create like a sort of choppy, blocky textural element, so that you don't have like a static background. It hasn't got to be overpowering and crazy. It's very subtle, the treatment we did to the background, but using the block dissolve again in the text transitions, incorporated with like a the boxy graphic element, helps create something that's got a bit of grit and energy, especially with the pacing. When it's really fast and flickery, it has a certain amount of energy in that transition. All right, well, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, if you're watching this after the live show, if you're coming to the replay, definitely ask any questions, and I'll answer them in due course. I will try and be a bit more regular. I was a little bit unwell the last few days, so I wasn't able to get on in a few days. So I'm back, and I'm obviously going to try and do these ongoing and try and explore other areas of creativity, and hopefully you find something useful out of them. If you have any suggestions, an area you'd like to look into, then of course by all means comment on any of these channels here. And other than that, I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. See you again. Bye.